Ani, Bonjour, Tanzi, Sega, welcome everyone. My name is Nochmoen Mushkogiashk, better known as Philip Cote III. I belong to the Underwater Panther clan, and I'm also a band member of Moose Deer Point First Nations. Today, I'm here to share with you a traditional land acknowledgement. ArtworxTO, Toronto's Year of Public Art 2021, and the City of Toronto would like to acknowledge our presence on the land that has been the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee peoples since time immemorial. And in 1805, with the signing of the Toronto Purchase, is now the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we reach back to those first Torontonians, we remember our Mother Earth through the 7 grandfather teachings: wisdom, bravery, respect, honesty, truth, humility, and love. The stories of each of these nations endure and continue to guide our thoughts and actions on this land. And as we acknowledge our Mother Earth, we acknowledge the medicine wheel and its teachings. We recognize the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west, and the 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. It is these 4 seasons that represent the circle of life. Nindanawe Maganidak, which means all my relations, which means we are all related. Aho, miigwech matakriasan. Hey ya, ho yay.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for one of the first 2022 programs for ArtworxTO, Toronto's Year of Public Art. I'm excited to be back here with you for our 4th episode of the ArtworxTO Talk Series Live at 5. ArtworxTO is a full year of public art programming all across the city of Toronto that aims to greatly diversify the opportunities for artists and audiences to engage in art. We have over 1,400 artists involved in this program and more than 300 new installations, murals, screenings, performances, and events unfolding across the city over 12 months. We kicked off our year in the last quarter of 2021, and I'm really excited about what is on offer into 2022. So over this full year, the ArtworxTO Live at 5 series will highlight some of these projects, among other amazing public art initiatives taking place around town. My name is Rebecca Carbin. I'm principal and founder of ART+PUBLIC UnLtd, and I have had the distinct pleasure of working with the incredible ArtworxTO team over the past couple of years to develop numerous parts of the program, but in particular, this talks program. Live at 5 issues within public art practices today. And as we developed this program in the midst of a global pandemic that began as a health crisis and morphed into a crisis that engaged politics, social economics, and so many aspects of civic engagement, collective living, and public life, we decided to assemble our overarching issues with a central concern for different aspects of art and health: personal, social, societal, physical, mental, and emotional. We want to engage with some of the numerous incredible programs and projects that Toronto's artists and art workers are undertaking this and every year, and to invite discussion around the important intersection of art and wellness, when, if, and how art can better our personal, physical, and social, emotional, mental health, individually and collectively. We developed a program that will examine 5 themes over 10 events, and I'm excited about this structure because it means giving our audience and moderators a chance to marinate on points of tension in each chapter 1 of our discussions and kind of deepen the conversation in the 2nd chapter. So our earlier talks are available on demand if you missed them or love them so much you want to watch them again. We started our series with 2 chapters on Emerging from the Pandemic Better, which featured artists' projects that came into existence specifically out of the pandemic experience and created strong connections through art projects. And tonight we're going into the second of 2 chapters on community building and wellness through the arts. So tonight's discussion centers around projects exploring the positive impacts of sharing personal and collective perspectives and experiences through art. As we move through the pandemic, what have artists learned about their practices and how can art support a sense of collective well-being? We have some fabulous panelists today, and I'm excited to hear about each of their projects and practices and how they've adapted and evolved. But first, a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We're live for a quick 60 minutes, so if you're watching us on YouTube, please feel free to type questions to the panelists in the comments. We are live specifically so that we can have questions from audience members. But then if you missed the live event, we will have these all available in the on-demand library, the ArtworxTO on-demand library after the fact, and this can be accessed at artworxto.ca. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our moderator, coming back for our second chapter, Marlene McKintosh. Marlene has been the Executive Director of Urban Arts since 2008. She's worked to build Urban Arts into the dynamic, sought-after, award-winning organization that it is now known to be. Marlene is well-versed in arts and nonprofit management, leadership, development, and capacity building. Utilizing the arts for change, Marlene works to ensure that arts are front and center in local communities, that young people have access to quality programs, services, and resources, and that their voices are included in decision-making processes. Marlene is a recipient of the Black Business and Professional Association's Women of Honor Award for Excellence in Services to the Community. Over to you, Marlene.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. As Rebecca alluded to, we have some very talented artists and art administrators here this evening. And so I'm going to begin. Each one is going to be presenting on a project that they're working on or have worked on. And I'm going to start to introduce each one first by reading their bio and then having them go into their project. So I'm going to start with Brad Hindson. So Brad, over his 14 years with Studio F-, Brad has used his practical and phenomenological understanding of materials and story to create physically daring, timeless projects. Hindson challenges himself to see and use materials in ways that fall far outside their given applications, while remaining focused on creating works that are beautiful, accessible, whimsical. Prior to establishing Studio F- in 2008, Hindson worked as a design lead for architecture firms Diamond Schmidt and KPMB, and as a lighting designer at UnLtd. And Brad is going to present to us about his project Lightwave, Friends of University Avenue. Take it away, Brad.
Thank you. Sorry, I had myself on mute. First, I want to thank Rebecca Carbin from ART+PUBLIC and Marlene McKintosh from Urban Arts for putting this together, and of course, the City of Toronto. It's so great that despite the challenges of these times, that we are having these conversations and sharing these ideas. With the topic today of art and wellness and how they serve each other, I'm going to be presenting a project that's been very near and dear to my heart for about 4 years. And our story begins with Christine Ralphs. Christine, like too many, spent years in and out of hospitals, at first supporting her partner through his diagnosis, treatment, and care for his cancer, and then later during his hospice care. And then in a terrible twist of events, her own diagnosis for treatment and cancer, forcing her to spend even more time in this precinct on University Avenue. During her care daily, she would look at the window and go for breaks, and in seeking mental escape from what she was going through. And the exterior of the hospital was lifeless and poorly maintained, and she made a vow that if she ever got out of there, she was going to make improvements to the street. You know, hospitals are 24-hour buildings. In winter months, they're dark. They're more dark than light outside. 6 months a year, the landscaping of University Avenue is dull, brown, and empty. And she made a decision that when she got healthier, she would provide light, hope, and beauty, and offer a place for escape. I was introduced to this project by Mulvey Banani. If we could just hold the slide there for a second. I was introduced to this project by Mulvey Banani lighting designers who were already interested in the project, eagerly partnered with them And our team grew to actually include Rebecca Carbin, who's the host today. So she's very aware of this project. Seen here was our original concept, was to hang a singular, huge, illuminated, transforming sculpture over the intersection of University and Gerrard. Next slide, if you may. As a metaphor of this giant sculpture would be suspended from all the hospitals as a metaphor how these buildings work to support us when we're not well. Then COVID hit and we were forced to take a step back and give room for the overwhelmed hospitals. It just wasn't possible to coordinate anchorage points for this massive structure with the hospitals so fatigued. Christine, of course, still motivated to do something. We pivoted to phase 2, which was to animate the existing assets on ground level. Next slide, please. The vision was to create one sculpture that brought light and animation to all the medians, illuminating trees, introducing new plants and flowers that stayed green year round, and importantly, to introduce an artwork that offered and worked with existing assets of nature for a place of serenity. Next slide, please. Radiant Journey is an installation of 202 delicately lit sculptures meant to uplift, engage, provide a space of calm. Next slide. Here's a earlier concept sketch of how light would kind of radiate through this space. Next slide, please. The form of each reed draws from influence from wild reeds and plant shoots, both for their beauty and simplicity in their design, but also because such references in nature have been proven to be effective for mental health. By day, the arrangement of slender fluted forms create an elegant wave, one that sweeps in and out of the ground, linking the 3 blocks together. And at night, the installation comes to life. The internal lights respond to brightness and hue to the sounds of the street. If you could be so kind to put the video on now. This here, shows an earlier concept sketch. The individual reeds were equipped with LEDs that gave us the opportunity for low resolution video. This is an early sketch of the water surface and how it could potentially project onto these sculptures. And here you can see the completed installation running using a custom design AI algorithm that generated video that responds to local sounds to implement and impact these waves onto these sculptures. And then here's just a series of videos that show it in form. This is early video work. I apologize for the quality of it, but it kind of shows the breadth and the scope and how the animation kind of goes all the way from College to Elm Street, covering the full hospital precinct and all the buildings that are there. Michael, Simon, and I, who I work with, and who's actually sitting behind me right now, had a conversation how quickly the sculpture evolved many times as a result of it being at the front lines of a pandemic. Not only did the work change from a singular suspended object to the ground, to a ground installation as a result of accommodating the challenges of COVID, but the meaning and focus of the work evolved. Often artwork is guided by a concept, an audience, a question, and then over time it matures, it's seen differently, and it means something else. This change usually takes years or decades, but we found this happened at this kind of hyper speed as we were building the piece. The start of this project was to provide a state, was to improve the state of University Avenue and offer beauty and escape for the patients and the family members supporting these patients in the buildings. The artwork, but the pandemic showed us, however, that the frontline workers also deserve this reprieve. We learned of their fatigue and exhaustion and saw that this work must include their needs as well. And while the artwork was not just for Christine's story and her family and friends that supported her, but it also needed to include the journey of the doctors, the caregivers, and the frontline workers in these buildings who tirelessly support our well-being also. I think that's all I'm going to say about the project at this moment.
Thank you so much, Brad. Very exciting project, and I hope to get downtown when COVID is behind us, hopefully, and hopefully the installation will still be there so that I could take a look at it myself. I'm going to move next to Monica Wickler. Monica is an LGBTQ2S+ Luxembourg Canadian artist with a passion for public art. Monica was originally trained in the craft of hand-painted outdoor advertising in the 90s and has moved her practice towards community-based public art installations. When Monica isn't found on a boom lift at the far top corner of a mural, she can be found in the studio planning her next creative placemaking adventure. Recent projects explore artist collaborations, inspiring artistic conversations that lead to an integration of values and cultural legacies, reclaiming otherwise overlooked public spaces through engaging communities, and exploring how vibrant public art can impact people's day-to-day lives. You're on, Monica.
Thank you. Wonderful. Marlene and Rebecca, thank you so much for putting this together and for inviting me to speak to this project. I feel so lucky and grateful that I was involved in this. I have to call it really a collaboration. We collaborated not only between Niall McGeesy Johnston, who was the lead artist in the storytelling mural, but we collaborated with, we really collaborated with the community on this project. The storytelling mural and healing corridor was happened in two parts of the city. One was at Central Hospital Lane, which runs just east of Sherburne across from Allen Gardens. In the slide, you can see the other laneway that's just south of Queen Street, next to Morse Street. The Morse Street Public School really inspired us with this one. There was a real opportunity for storytelling in this laneway, and the Healing Gardens, really the Laneway project was one of our key partners, and the Laneway project is a non-for-profit community-centered urban planning, and they were responsible for putting in these beautiful gardens that you can see that were planted with local medicinal plants. So you can see how we combined all these ideas and centered them around the idea of healing. So this, another component of this project, a really strong component, was youth mentorship. So we had, in this slide, you can see the entire surface of the laneway was painted from a full block. So one full block of that laneway south of Queen Street East. It's really a wonderful place to visit now. It was completely reclaimed with the plants and the colors, and you can see the mural that was painted by Gosia Komorski. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So you can see here how reclaiming this space with not only the vibrant colors and the patterns on the street, that when you walk through it, you can see the kids skipping along this mural and really interacting. So it's wonderful to see how you can bring public art into a space and how the community will interact with that. So we put the planters in with the intention of the community coming out afterwards. So we would leave this project, and the community keeps coming out and keeps forming these bonds with each other. Community pride in watering the plants and clipping them, and it was really a wonderful experience. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you, this is the storytelling part of the mural. So Niall McGeesy Johnson and we collaborated on a storytelling mural where it was an opportunity for him. He is a real storyteller, a super character. It's our second or third project together where we've collaborated on a large scale piece of public art. And the story that Niall was telling here is the gift of the jewel weed. So it's a story about healing and medicinal properties in plants, and the story of the frog. There is a plaque on the wall when you go and visit. Look for the plaques, and they tell you the stories. And this whole laneway was reclaimed from top to bottom. So this is the healing corridor. When you walk further down, as you see in the next slide, there's a whole series of youth murals. We invited 5 Indigenous youth to come out and be mentored by McGeesy and I to learn how to bring their craft into a larger scale and into the public eye, which was new for them. So yeah, I think the most important thing about this project was how it combined healing, not only through reclaiming this space, but through the community being able to come out into the space afterwards, and creating communities within those neighborhoods that we put the artwork in. But not only that, the community of the artists and the youth and the mentors and mentees. It was a really powerful thing to experience. It was really wonderful. Is there another slide? I think the last slide shows this, this young fellow painted this beautiful mask. His grandfather's a Haida artist in the BC and the West Coast. And you can see, looking through some of the plants that we put in, it's just that combination of reclaiming the space with greenery and life, and then with that layer of murals. So I think the healing comes in those wonderful layers where you where you're not only bringing public art in one format, but you're actually drawing in the communities. I think there's real value in that. And this last slide shows we did this project early last summer, so it shows our launch, which was socially distanced. But even despite that, we had a wonderful time. And that's that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica. I am going to go next to Vanessa Dion Fletcher. So Vanessa Dion Fletcher is a Lenape Potawatomi neurodiverse artist. I hope I said those right. She employs porcupine quills, wampum belts, and menstrual blood to reveal the complexities of what defines a body physically and culturally. Reflecting on an Indigenous and gendered body with a neurodiverse mind, she creates art using composite media, primarily in performance, textile, and video. Dion Fletcher graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with an MFA in performance. She has exhibited across Canada and the USA. Her work is in the Indigenous Art Center, Joan Flash Artist Book Collection, V-Tape, Seneca College, and the Archives of American Art. And Dion is going to present to us on her project, project as part of the Parquet project.
All right. Hi, everybody. Kula Malsi, Nijashinzi Vanessa. My name is Vanessa. I hope you're all well. Thank you for that introduction and for inviting me to share a little bit about my work today. My work really started, I learned quill work and I started working with porcupine quills in 2017. And when the pandemic started, I first learned how to dye quills with synthetic dye. And I'd been wanting to learn how to use natural dyes. And when the pandemic started, that really provided an opportunity to turn to spending more time outside, spending more time away from people, and engaging with the plants and artistic practices that can really be done and have been done at people's kitchen tables and in small spaces. So in this image, you can see hibiscus and marigolds, and that top one peeking out is some black walnut. Working with these dyes, the first thing I did was to make a kind of, I wanted to make a kind of color wheel to, really take some time to look at the quills and how they were absorbing these dyes. I didn't have a lot of formal mentorship. I did a lot of research through the internet and books and getting tidbits of information, talking to other quill work artists. And so this first piece I made using the natural dyes, I wanted to make it in a circle so that it would be my kind of own take on a natural dye color wheel. And I was really enamored with this simple form. So this type of quill work is embroidery on paper. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the porcupine quills and I'm soaking them in after they're dyed. I soak them in warm water, and then you flatten them out and sew them onto the surface of, in this case, paper. A lot of people would do this type of quill work on hide, so it could be made into moccasins or onto bags or other clothing items. And I really like working two-dimensionally and doing this practice on paper. When I get the next slide, I think a slightly different image of the same work. So here I've taken kind of the same form and I doubled the ring, giving me a little bit more opportunity to work with the different colors. Cork is a textile practice, and it's quite slow and thoughtful, and really kind of lends itself to self-reflection, a kind of inward reflection. Lots of artists who work with porcupine quills or this kind of successor beadwork or caribou tufting really talk about that time as working on these kinds of projects as healing, as very beneficial, kind of personally, and really helps focus. So I try to, I feel like that kind of process is expressed in these works, in the kind of slow transition into different colors and simplifying to focus one's attention on the kind of slight variation of the different hues. I'm using something that's called Zigzag Stitch. So there's lots of different stitches that can be done with the porcupine quills, and these ones, the way you fold the quill makes a zigzag pattern, which is how it gets its name. And yeah, I appreciate that for the kind of detail. So after developing this work, I was invited by Shani K. Parsons to work with her and Gallery TPW to translate this kind of very, maybe kind of intimate, small work, like I said, that's often done at kitchen tables and in small spaces, into a piece of public art. So I was interested in, making this transformation from something that is just, on a small piece of paper to something that is as large or kind of larger than our bodies. The diameter of the ring is 6 feet, and it's on a 4-foot post. So yeah, here you can see me interacting with it. So it's, taller than me. The quill work itself is the ring is about my size, and it just provides, I like that it brings us back to that connection between the quill work being having this history of being in relation to our bodies, and I kind of take it out of that, doing it on paper, and then bring it back to that and blow it up to using photographic processes to be in relationship to the body again. And in these works, in these images, I'm doing a performance where I'm taking those same dyes that I use for the quill work, the hibiscus and the marigold, and I'm dyeing myself or a garment that I'm wearing with those same dyes. So it gives the viewer a kind of insight into the kind of color, and gives me another chance, and the viewer another chance, a different way to interact with the plants. And is a fun kind of happening this is Shalmar Park at near Eglinton and Bathurst.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Wonderful project. And I'm going next, last but certainly not least, David Carey, Co-Executive Director at the Bentway. David Carey is a city animator with a background in public affairs, storytelling, and fundraising. As Co-Executive Director of the Bentway, he builds curiosity, trust, and support through a growing family of audiences and partners, while ensuring that the organization remains on budget and on brand. In 2018, Dave joined the Toronto Arts Council's Cultural Leaders Lab, a leadership development program for arts professionals who demonstrate the potential to drive change in the sector. He is a yogi, a poet, a cyclist, and an ally. Dave sits on the board of East End Art and lives on the East Danforth. Dave is going to present to us projects on It's All Right Now and Safe in Public Space.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here today. I'm not a practicing artist, but I do consider myself a public art practitioner, and I want to talk to you about a public art project that the Bentway pursued in the very early days of the pandemic called It's All Right Now, and a personal perspective at how we approached that project, some feedback from our artist participants, and our search for catharsis during those emotional times. We entered the pandemic in March 2020. The Bentway was about 2 years old. We were a very young organization. And like all of you, our world definitely ground to a halt. And we felt an urgent need to respond to the moment out in public with artist partners. And the first thing we noticed was that the prevailing messages were somewhat singular. You know, this idea of that we're all stronger together, we're all in this together, that became sort of this overwhelming chorus. And we sought to move a little bit beyond that and to give space for other perspectives. Of course, the Bentway site has a certain scale to it that invites kind of these colossal grand gestures. And we knew immediately that wouldn't be possible in the early days of COVID. Even if we'd wanted to, fabrication shops were closed for non-essential work. There were supply chain delays. So that instinct for a grand gesture had to be ignored. And equally, the Bentway had sort of formed our craft with these large shared experiences, inviting people to experience something in person at the same time. And you see some examples of art projects and community-led projects that have done that so well here in Toronto. But the very idea in spring 2020 of inviting hundreds of people to come together and congregate was just unacceptable both to us and the city of Toronto. And then lastly, we found our own feelings and the tone out there in the world constantly in flux. We were all feeling so many different things, and we were feeling different things every day. One week there was a hopeful optimism, we're doing this now so that we can have a summer, we can have a fall. And the next week, we all felt down and confused. There were social uprisings, there was insurgencies, there was obviously a lot going on in the world. So we found ourselves, next slide, please, having to rewrite our own rules of how we approach public art projects and reset our own instincts. So we were aiming now for less singular messages, moving away from everything will be okay and making space for whatever you're feeling is okay. Not a single big grand gesture, but using the city itself as a canvas, using the available outlets that we had. And lastly, moving away from static, enduring sentiments to meeting the moment and capturing the current. And that is how It's All Right Now was born. It's All Right Now was a public art project at the scale of the city that aimed to engage over 30 artists to respond to their own feelings through the creation of new public artworks. So we asked them a very simple question: what's right to you right now, and what words are you living by? We told them that they shouldn't feel the need to be pithy. They shouldn't feel the need that this had to turn or grow into a slogan, but we wanted them to use this creative output as a way to share their own perspective and hopefully inspire some positive feelings with residents across the city. And so we connected with partners at Whitman Emerson and Cassette Media, and we're able to tap into this magical moment where available canvases around the city, from digital billboards to wall posting locations, were suddenly freed up as companies spent down on their advertising because we were all staying inside most of the time. So we received about $1.2 million of free in-kind advertising space, and sort of inspired by the idea of the Bentway retuning and reimagining the Gardener, retuning and reimagining these channels traditionally reserved for consumerism and advertising into artist canvases. So you see here some billboards along the Gardner Expressway, some billboards at Dundas Square. We had a roaming video truck that toured around the waterfront and went into neighborhoods up in Scarborough, as well as 74 well posting locations around the city. This all had to be done very quickly. I had an interview with Kate Taylor from the Globe and Mail who asked me, why are the well postings so small? Well, they had to be done with crews of one, because even at that time, pairing up more than one person at a time in person was just not something that we felt comfortable doing. And so the artists that we ended up working with had a wide array of responses and reactions to the question, what words are you living by? And I'll go through some of my favorites. This is a work by Annie Castillo, and I think you can read a sense of longing, an endurance, a melancholy, but also a tender optimism. When will we meet again? Anne Michaels here, I think, was reflecting on the opportunity afforded by COVID and the social and city building movements that had gained so much momentum. There's an optimism here, even a doggedness. Don't turn the old power back on. Levine Kelly and other artists, I think, found themselves questioning what they had held dear and what they considered most essential, questioning both the systems that they thought that were there to support them, as well as the relationships they thought were most essential to them. I think there's a rawness and maybe even a world wariness here to this piece. If I needed you, would you come to me? Other artists like the wonderful kooky collective Younger Than Beyonce, based here in the city, were responding to this new fully digital world that we were living in, the loss of second and third spaces, and kind of this little lie that we told ourselves that we were indeed flourishing. And my last example here, work by Anita Dabani, sort of an acceptance or a resignation of the moment that we were all in, but knowing that this too shall pass. Sometimes we have to lose sight of the shore. Here are some of the other artists that participated, a wealth of different reactions. We also spoke with a lot of artists who declined our invitation to participate, either because they didn't have the time, they were caring for loved ones, or they didn't feel in a very creative space. And the labor that goes into being creative was not something that they wanted to make space for at that time. Other artists that we spoke to felt absolutely relished the opportunity and really saw it as a cathartic moment. And some more examples here on the next slide. We had 32 participating artists among 3 waves. Some shout outs to some of our partners here, our friends at Cassette, the Waterfront BA, RBC Foundation, and the Black Speculative Arts Movement, who helped curate a final wave of artists whose work was rooted in Afrofuturism, and a whole wealth of partners, particularly media partners, who were remarkably game to give up their space on screens, trucks, and posters around the city. Here's a quick shot of my team, the Bentway staff team, sort of mid-pandemic. Some smiles on our faces. We found this process to be remarkably cathartic for us, and this was the public art project that we needed at the time. And I think if ever there's a time for metamorphosis, it's now, as we emerge from whatever stage we were at the pandemic to whatever stage we will be in next. And for us at the Bentway, we really treated ourselves pre-pandemic as a public space that did public art. But through this project, It's All Right Now, we've been able to open up and reaffirm ourselves. The Bentway is more than just a place, but a way of seeing what the city can be, and a way of working with the city's raw materials as both canvas and site and subject. So for us, here are some public art projects that we pursued since we completed It's All Right Now, that actually took us from our site to other sections of the Gardner, down along the waterfront at other sites of infrastructure, on digital channels. We've done performances on security cameras, and it's really opened up our eye in a really exciting way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad. Some exciting projects there. So thank you all for presenting on your projects. I am going to go now into the questions, and I'm going to be asking each of you a series of questions. And also, for those of you who have questions in the audience, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll get to them after. So I'm going to start with Brad. I'm really intrigued by your projects as I was reviewing them. And you had a 2020 project in particular that really caught my attention, the project entitled Flower, that was installed at the Kelowna Hospital in BC. And as you noted, as I was reading upon it, you noted that giving flowers to wish someone well as support during times of grief, the health of the flower is like the health of the human being. And that really struck me. And you also said that artwork is a way of giving flowers to staff and patients at the hospital. Giving flowers is something that we all do, but something that I don't think that on a regular basis or, at any point that we ever, when we say get well soon, that we've consciously put thought into that and made that link. So could you talk to us about this concept and how it impacted the wellness of the staff and patients and the visitors to the hospital? And was the hospital community made stronger as a result?
Oh, sure. Thank you for the question. The project was it's more or less recent for us, and it's one of our favorites. The inversion of the flower was really to kind of flip the narrative on how modern health is like a whole system of health. You know, I think when you look at a flower to determine its health, you focus on the head of the flower. So we intentionally put it upside down to say that, like, we need to look at whole system. You know, health isn't just, skin deep, but it's, how is our mental health? What are we putting in and out of our body? And so this kind of whimsical act of flipping it upside down, while still maintaining the very positive energy of a flower, was really exciting for us to execute. The response for the piece has been very positive. In fact, it was the image of the flower was used by a local women's support group for painting therapy, where the participants were given line drawings of the sculpture, and the exercise was to paint in their own way and style as part of their therapy. These pieces were, I believe, installed in the building and shared. And so that felt really good, that not only is the piece working hard to provide joy and act as this symbol of health, but also that it can be used as a tool for wellness as well. Unfortunately, the pandemic has prevented us from visiting the site and interacting and engaging with the community. But this is the feedback that we've gotten remotely.
Thank you. I would love to hear later on how it has impacted and that the community. And I just want to ask you, are you planning on doing something similar in Toronto at any time soon? Because I think something like that would be wonderful in our city as well.
We would love to do a flower locally. We're actually in the midst of a proposal right now, which I can't talk about, but we have hopes to put one in the GTA soon.
Amazing. And for the audience, if you want to go on Brad's website and take a look at the project, it's a beautiful piece of work. Monica, you talked about it in your presentation as well, around the work that you do around mentoring and supporting the growth and development of other artists through mentorship. And we know, and in my own work as well, I see it every day. We know that mentorship is really a really important way for up and coming career artists to hone their craft. Can you share your experiences with mentoring and how you think that it also helps to support and maintain artist well-being as well as that of the sector?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question, Marlene. Thank you. I think mentorship and collaboration fall in the same vein with this. A couple of years ago, I was working on a project that I had funding for, and I was up on the wall, and it was something I was doing on my own. And one of the main reasons, that I do work in the public art field is the playfulness of it, the fun that you can have, that sort of being paid to play, And I was at the point right in that moment where I felt, this would be so much more fun if I was doing this with a group of artists, like I have had that experience previously when I was working in advertising. We were a team on the wall, and what we were producing was less important than how we felt when we were producing it. So from that moment on, I was like, okay, every time I get a project, I'm going to make sure I work into the budget an element of either mentorship or collaboration. And I think what I've felt and what I think is gained out of these projects now is that, you get this sense of community. It always comes back to that sense of community. So within the artists that are working together, you're leaning on each other, and it's like being in a forest with trees. You take the trees out of it, and you have this one tree that's got nothing to lean on and is getting racked by the wind. But when you have a forest of trees, you're a community, and you're all leaning on each other. It's really a fantastic way to do a bunch of things like knowledge exchange. So it doesn't always happen from the mentee to the mentor. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's a cultural knowledge exchange. I think we support each other emotionally, and we help each other building our confidence when we work together. And I really strongly think that when there's a mentorship component in a project, it's not only the mentees that are gaining. I think everybody gains from that experience. We often, when we do jams, we'll have an established artist next to an emerging artist. So they're working side by side. They might not even be any dialogue happening between the two, but they can out of the corner of their eye, they can see how they're using the same materials, and sharing some techniques and some ways that they might be using those materials and methods in their own ways. So there's that exchange that happens on a really quiet level. I think to your question of how does it maintain the well-being of the sector, I think when you introduce new talent and new perspectives into the sector, then there's a lot of value in that. I think that these partnerships on all levels, really, there's only things to gain out of that, Marlene.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Vanessa, could you talk to us about your work as an Indigenous and neurodiverse artist? If you could first define for us what neurodiversity is and how it informs your practice.
Yeah, so I moved from using the term disabled to neurodiverse. Is a term that I learned fairly recently, maybe 5 or 6 years ago at the most. And from my understanding, it comes from the autistic community and is now used more broadly by people to just reposition their cognitive differences as something that is, of value rather than necessarily, something that is disadvantaging or disabling. I certainly experience both aspects of the experience. And both aspects kind of inform my work. And there's some intersections and overlaps with my Indigenous identity and experience. I'm using, I talked about my porcupine quill work, which has been used by Indigenous people in North America for hundreds of thousands of years. And as I mentioned, it's a precursor to beadwork, or one of them anyway. So the influences my work. I think the way that my neurodiversity gives me just a particular perspective and way of working and challenges, and it I have a lot of intersections with language, so my kind of use and expression of English and the way I learn and process language, and then my sometimes lack of access to my Indigenous language, Lenape. It's a language that has, there are no first speakers left. It's a very endangered language. So I have, personally a lot of grief around that. And working with quill work is a way for myself and, sometimes, my community to, work outside of English, to work outside of the colonialism that this language traps us in, and gets us to, connect to, or helps me, connect to plants and to animals and to a kind of expression and recording and interacting that somewhat subverts those systems.
Thank you for that. If you could quickly tell us, within the Indigenous community, what do you see as some of the key practices or processes that can enhance and support wellness within individuals or communities?
Yeah, I think it's has such a broad community. I just think about, it makes me think about different ways people are working or what they need. I think it would be really different across different ages and geographies and, even, materials or kind of modes of working. I've really relied on, community practices of baking, connecting to different beading circles, or definitely get a lot of knowledge and support from community. And that's what I have. Maybe I'll just pause there. Gathering my thoughts. Thanks.
All right, thank you. David, so your work within the sector has been quite stellar, including, all of the successes you've had while you were at TIFF and now your work at the Bentway in such a very short period of time. The work done at the Bentway is quite intriguing in the way that it uniquely activates and uses public spaces in the downtown area. Could you talk to us about how you see the Bentway's work of activating public spaces, contributing to community building and wellness, and particularly as we're in the midst of COVID and also trying to work our way through ArtworxTO's year of public art?
Well, I think all art is powerful, but I think that public art and art that engages directly with the city has this uniquely magic power. I really do. We at the Bentway, we try not to think of our public art projects as just animating the space. I think that it's easy to think of public art initiatives as beautification efforts. But I think all of us here on this call likely think it can be more, it must be more, and it is more. So we've never tried to separate the Bentway's work in urban transformation and reimagining infrastructure, separating that from our public art initiatives, but really seeing them as in service of each other. Maybe I'll talk about a specific example. This summer, in summer 2021, all of our public art projects were centered around the thematic of play and playing in public and the role that play has in shaping cities, and this moment that we're in now where play is needed for urban recovery. And again, I think what we found is that not only do artists and the creators get a lot of value in the creation of public art, but the participants and audiences can discover new connectedness. Neighborhoods can come together. Public art can inspire discovery and exploration. It can provoke. It can direct physical activity. It can reignite local business. It really is. It really is. I think it does have magic powers. And I think when public art can inspire us to see and build the city in new ways, we all win. We win for mental health, we win for physical health, we win for community health.
Thank you for that. And, you know, as a storyteller, how do you position the projects that the Bentway undertakes to uniquely address some of the largest social issues that we're seeing playing out in the city currently?
We did a wonderful project last fall, in fall 2020, called Safe in Public Space, where we wanted to explore issues of safety that were rising in the public eye and public understanding, and gaining this really important and long overdue momentum. And so the way we approach a project like that was not just to engage traditional experts and practitioners like city planners and people who build parks and people who design parks and people who enforce park bylaws, but also with the understanding that an artist, a choreographer, a dancer, a visual artist has just as much to say and teach about safety in public space as a traditional expert. So, you know, while we commissioned articles and editorial writing from architects, designers, and planners, we also commissioned a group like Cage to Dance to do a site-specific choreography about safety. We commissioned an artist like Cyrus Marcus Ware to create new work, to experiment, to create prototypes. And so I think the way the public art can tackle social issues is for us to understand that artists have a unique and essential perspective and are as much experts as anyone else.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So right now in the chat, there are a few questions popping up, and I know we're at the 6 o'clock mark, but I hope you can hang with us for a little bit longer as we get through some of these questions. So I'm going to just jump over to those questions. Brad, there's a question for you. Is there an education program for the project that we talked about to raise awareness and inform the hospital users so that they are aware that looking through the window, they have that gift for them?
No, currently there isn't in place. I mean, it's always a good idea to help educate the people around them so that what they're seeing can have more meaning. It's something we should look at. You know, we were kind of naively hoping that the piece would be enough of a space that you would find to go to. But I mean, I think it's a good idea.
Most definitely. And for everyone, whoever wants to take this question. So I'm concerned about conversation. How do you see change and evolution affecting the image or functionality of the pieces and interventions? Who wants to take that one?
Well,
that's an interesting one, huh?
It is very interesting. I think what I have to say about that is, like, I would welcome change and intervention. Please come in and intervene. Do those things that right away seem like, did that need to be a negative thing? No, that could be a positive thing. All interactions are valuable, so bring it.
Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in?
I think in working in public or more public spaces, that's always a kind of possibility, and it's always a potential. Yeah, I think just to kind of echo what Monica said, and to say that I think it's something, it's definitely something that I think at least a little bit about, is like, what are the potentials for those conversations and change that could happen with pieces, because you have a lot less control when things are outside. Yeah, it certainly invites a different kind of opportunity, and yeah, one might, as a kind of artist, might need to have a little bit less, or just be open to that, and be ready to maybe relinquish some of that control.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I think that's about all we have time for today. I'm sorry we weren't able to get through all of the questions, and I'm hoping that some way we'll be able to answer them through social media at some point. If not, we could find other ways to address those questions in the future in the work that we do. At this point, I would just like to thank everybody. Thank you all for your amazing presentations and for the conversation today. Thank you to the city for putting this together. And thank you all for joining us this evening. For the audience for joining us this evening for this session. And I would just like to encourage you that as you go about your day, your days, your nights, your movements, wherever you encounter art, take a moment to engage with it. Remember that art has the power to heal and to create safety for us. And so, as Dave said in his presentation, or, couple of points there, as we go through the day, a couple of the projects that he worked on, know that when we do meet again, hopefully soon, we will be able to say it's all right now and actually mean it. So thank you all for that. And just to note that the next session will be on February the 9th. It will be focused on all access, public art, and accessibility. Thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. I truly enjoyed this, and looking forward to seeing some of the next talks over the next few months. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you, Marlene.